I'm really bored with hearing Gen Zs are lazy, they don't have the same work ethic as generations before them, they're just, it's hard to get them to do the work that you really want them to do because it's bullshit. And I'm going to explain to you why. And I think rather than give you a solution, I think having some perspective on this will really, really help. So you have to remember that Gen Z were the first generation to grow up with technology, but it's not just them growing up with technology. They were the first generation to grow up with parents who had technology. And so their parents were the first generation that worked 24/7, right? We're the generation that's always had email, that's always, been able to work 24/7 if you're in kind of like a white collar job or whatever. And so actually any job, right? You're contactable all the time. Even if you work in retail, someone can message you. So my point is, the reason that this generation are not willing to work in the same way that we are I'm an elder millennial, is that they were the sacrifice. And what I mean by that is I grew up running around in the streets, right? And when my parents worked, they worked, but then when they're at home, they're at home. This generation, they are not driven by the same thing because they were the sacrifice. Their parents have worked 24/7. I've done it to my kids, right? I'm always on. And so not only did they not have the free range childhood that, say, I had, they also didn't have the present parents at home. And now there's plenty of reasons why parents weren't present back in the day. We don't need to go into that, but it's changed their priorities, right? They're much more purpose driven, but they're also not willing to sacrifice it all because it's not going to have the same results for them in quite the same way it did for, say, my generation or generations before. And so they are absolutely hard workers. They want to make an impact. They want to have purpose. They're just not going to do it at the cost of everything else because they have lived the cost. They were the cost. They are the generation that didn't get to roam. They didn't get the parents that actually switched off at the end of the day. They understand the cost. And so I just think it's a really interesting perspective to be aware of because there are so many great Gen Zs and younger millennials out there willing to work hard, just not going to sacrifice everything for it. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's an amazing thing. And if you learn to work with it, they will be unstoppable and have brilliant lives. Who's going to begrudge them that?